Hey students, welcome to Module 5. This week we're going to talk about America's Hero. You have a pretty good idea who that is, I'm pretty sure. So Captain America was Marvel's first big hero. He wasn't their first though, and Marvel wasn't even Marvel when they first started out. So they were originally Timely Comics, and then they would become Atlas Comics, and then ultimately Marvel in 1961. Their first release was an anthology called Marvel Comics, which is how they got their name. It was issued in 1939 to capitalize on the superhero trend, which was started off by people like Superman and Batman. It featured the Human Torch. We see this in this first picture right here. The first one is not the Fantastic Four version. The name of the second Human Torch was intentional. They were trying to create a new version because the old Human Torch had kind of fallen out of popularity. Also the Angel, who was kind of a Batman-esque costume detective, and then the Submariner, who was an ill-tempered prince of Atlantis. Imagine Aquaman, but like a total dick. Submariner's he's an extraordinary dick. There's a reason why he hasn't showed up in any movies, as like a buddy to the Avengers or anything. It's just he just does not get along with anyone, and he just goes off. But he's been around forever. He's one of their oldest characters, and at some point we'll get him. I have no idea who they'll cast. That'll be like totally awesome whenever they figure who's going to play him. So the first two characters, the Human Torch and the Angel, were lost to the Golden Age. And as I said, the Submariner hasn't appeared yet on film. But 2 years later, in 1941, Joe Simon and Jack Kirby came up with Captain America in Captain America Comics #1, which actually predated our entry into World War II, slightly. And that was Marvel's first breakout success, the first hit, and it would literally stand the test of time, and we'll talk about more later, and go on to become one of the foundations of current superhero cinema. So this was the first big Marvel character. So like Wonder Woman, Captain America is very much a product of World War II and is tied to it. As I said, even though he technically entered the war a year before America did, because we were busy sitting on our hands until Pearl Harbor, Steve Rogers was too skinny and weak to enlist, so he had to turn to miracles of science to become a super soldier. And he was the strong, patriotic, God-fearing, righteous hero that America needed at that particular point in time. So he was almost like a propaganda character. He punched Adolf Hitler in the face, battled with the Red Skull, and after the war, he fought against the Red Menace, communism. So he kind of followed the path of the world. Unfortunately, his popularity waned into the late 40s, and the first version of Captain America was canceled or put on ice in one storyline. And he made a few scattered appearances in the early 50s until he was revived by Stanley Leibowitz, also known as Stan Lee, in 1963 as a member of the Avengers. So oddly enough, his old-fashioned values ended up being much of what endeared him to readers and viewers in his later incarnation, and we're doing a discussion on that to talk about that. So like Batman, Captain America also was given a sidekick. So Bucky Barnes, he was too young to be enlisted in the army, and so he was their mascot, but of course he was there anyway, as you always seem to have in war movies and war stories. So he accompanied Cap on his missions. He often needed to be rescued because he was an impetuous kid. And he was also killed off numerous times in order to give Captain America revenge narratives. And then he'd be revived and then occasionally replaced by other Buckys, so other characters would play him. And then the Silver Age version of Captain America trained and groomed Sam Wilson, who would later become the Falcon, to be his sidekick and partner. So after Bucky was gone, then the Falcon became Captain America's new sidekick. So at several points also, Steve Rogers and some of his replacements, so other people were also Captain America after Steve Rogers left. They would become disillusioned with America, and they would take on the nomad persona, the hero without a country. And in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this is kind of loosely referenced in the transition between Civil War and Infinity War, when Cap stops shaving, stops cutting his hair, and he stops returning Tony Stark's phone calls. And he kind of takes on like a borderline nomad persona, which they definitely mention that he's kind of like a hero without a country in that respect. So your reading assignment is Super Gods, Chapter 3, the second half of that, Super Warrior and the Amazon Princess, pages 37 to 40. And then there is a reading quiz that goes with that. And then also additional reading links, Captain America Comics #1, that's $1.99 at Comixology. If you feel like downloading it and reading it, go for it. It's a good read. A good thing to look at, but by no means is it going to be mandatory here. Your reading quiz only has one question, as always. And then your first discussion this week, is about Steve Rogers and his old-fashioned American values. So how do Steve Rogers and Captain America's old-fashioned values serve as both comic relief and indicators of the steadfastness of his character, as seen in the Marvel movies? And I see a lot of you have already been involved in that, which is good. And then the movie for this week, and I say movie, but we'll get more into that in a second, Captain America, the First Avenger from 2011. So it's directed by Joe Johnston, who also directed a movie called The Rocketeer for Disney. It was one of their serious films, which was a commercial failure, but it was also the template for how to do a period superhero film. Because it's, he's basically a superhero because he's a guy who can fly because he's got rockets and stuff and a helmet. And it's set in, let's say it's set in the 1930s. So Joe Johnston knows how to do period pieces with superheroes, so he was an obvious person to have do this. I think the guy who directed the Incredible Hulk movie, which doesn't really fully fit into the Marvel Universe canon, offered to do it, and they told him no, which that's really awful, but whatever. So this was scripted by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, who wrote all of the Captain America films. Okay, and also the last two Avengers films. So they did Infinity War and Endgame. It also spent a decade in development hell, including the standard disgruntled comic creator lawsuit initiated by Joe Simon. A lot of the people involved in Marvel ended up filing lawsuits. Comics are notorious for various folks kind of chiseling in and pushing other people out of getting their royalties and credits. We'll talk more about that in Module 7 when we talk about Stan Lee, who was infamous for that. Okay, he may seem like a really sweet old guy, but man, did he ever know how to chisel in there and get credit for stuff that he didn't actually do. So anyway, this was enough time for all the lawsuits and just the development hell for Chris Evans to get over being in the horrible, horrible Fantastic Four movies. Maybe not that horrible, but what they did to Galactus, I can't even get into that. And he was willing to give being a superhero another shot, and he would commit to doing 7 films as Captain America. He originally said no, and then he's like, okay, I'll do it. I'll do 7 films. So the comic origin of this film, there's a truncated, shortened version of Cap's origin story in Captain America Comics #1, which gets to that a little bit. And the aftermath of his transformation scene is copied in the film pretty closely. The Red Skull also makes his first appearance in that comic, but his true identity is very different, and he's not as important of a character in the comics in many cases. Also, a lot of the visual details in Captain America, the First Avenger, seem to come from the Ultimate series by Mark Millar from 2002 to 2011. And this series was also a heavy influence on the first 2 Avenger movies as well. Particularly almost the entire plot of the first Avengers film comes from the Ultimates. Okay, and if you look at the uniform of Captain America in the Ultimates, it's very similar to the one he ends up wearing in the Captain America movies. So the death of Bucky although depicted differently, because Bucky was basically born to die, and the Captain getting frozen. Those both come from Avengers #4 from 1964, which rewrote much of Captain's history to try to make everything kind of fit. Now, Bucky in the comics has normally been depicted as a little plucky young sidekick on the run, but it wasn't until the Ed Brubaker run of Captain America from 2005 to 2009 that we get an adult Bucky, and he ends up getting transformed by a pseudo-death in the same way as he does from this film into the Winter Soldier, And the following article, Captain America comic book and the movie comparison guide, details some of those similar differences and similarities. So use that link and it will take you to that article. The synopsis for this film, Steve Rogers, 80 pounds, soaking wet, longs to enlist and do his part for his country during World War II. Just like his strapping best friend Bucky Barnes, who's already enlisted. Unfortunately, he's got a laundry list of preconditions, including his shocking scrawniness, which make him unsuitable for combat. But a German scientist working with the U.S. takes pity on him and makes him a candidate for the super secret Super Soldier Project. Later, while working in Europe for the USO as a performer, Rogers reunites with Bucky and helps combat the Nazi shadow organization Hydra, run by the Red Skull, who somehow unearthed a superpowered energy source for their high-tech weapons. Where would they get that? Could it possibly come from one of the elemental Infinity Stones? Who knows? By no means is this the best of the Captain America films, which have routinely been among the best in the MCU, and I really think that starting with The Winter Soldier and definitely with Civil War, it kind of helped push the whole thing to where it ended up. But it is crucial for the understanding of the series continuity, and also it helps you understand Steve Rogers' decision at the end of Endgame, why he chooses to do what he does. Hint, it has everything to do with Peggy Carter. So you have to see this movie to kind of understand that. The other thing too is, watch this film, answer the questions. But you know what? The other Captain America films are so awesome. Watch those too. And I've got them on here. Click on those. It'll take you straight to them. I'm not going to ask you any specific questions about those movies, but I highly recommend watching those for kind of crucial understanding of the Marvel Universe. And also, I have some other great links too. There is the Captain America Episode 1 from the 1944 TV serial. I mean, it's hilarious and terrible, but it's wonderful at the same time. And then in the 1970s, they made some Captain America 2 series, and there's a whole Evel Knievel thing, because this guy wears nothing but like motorcycle outfits and a motorcycle helmet, and he's always doing motorcycle tricks. Captain America rides a bike, but he doesn't. That's not all he does, but that's all this guy does. So this is a clip from Death Too Soon from the 70s. And then also here's the entire Captain America from 1989 movie, which everything I've seen from it is just totally terrible. But it shows like in what dire straits Marvel was back in the 80s and 90s. And they're like, sure, man, you can, here, Captain America, whatever, we don't care. We haven't got any money. You pay us $50 and we can, pay parking for the month or something like that. Shows how low that Marvel fell. But anyway, so this week there's a lot of stuff to watch. So if you wanted to just kind of keep yourself busy, stay in your house and do nothing but binge watch, this is a good week for it. And then your discussion questions are here. Do those. Eventually I'll grade them. We'll talk more about that later. Okay. I apologize for my slowness on a lot of things, but keep these up. These are important. They're going to come up later. And then that's it. Enjoy week 5. I was really not a fan of Captain America until the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now he's one of my favorite characters. Like, it goes against everything that I am, but I think Steve Rogers is pretty rad. All right, enjoy. I'll talk to you later.